Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Knowledge for Edge. I am Imam Jato Abdul Rashid. Inshallah ta'ala, we are going to have a series where we look at the Islamic law of inheritance. Islamic law of inheritance is very comprehensive. We look at the meaning of inheritance because when a person dies, it's not everything he or she left behind that is considered as inheritance. In that case, we look at the rights that are associated with the estates or the property of a deceased person. When a person dies, what are the rights associated with his estate? Then we look at the meaning of inheritance itself. We look at the causes, the conditions, and the pillars of inheritance. We shall also look at each of these heirs: the father, the mother, the children, sons and daughters, then the siblings, maternal siblings, full siblings, and paternal siblings. We also look at the inheritance of the fetus, then the hermaphrodites. They look at the Zawul Arham, and so on and so forth. I assure you that you are going to enjoy this series, Islamic law of inheritance, an overview, and of course, an in-depth study and understanding of these laws. Islamic law of inheritance is quite different from what obtains in other places. In some places, when the person dies, everything left behind is inherited by the first son. You ask me, what happened to the daughters? The son inherits everything and he is not under any obligation to share with his siblings. If he does that, it's out of his own discretion. But you agree with me that this, is unfair, and that is what has led to so many crises in many homes. But what happens in Islam? First thing we must know is that, like I said, when the person dies, it's not everything that he or she left behind that constitutes inheritance. Therefore, what constitutes inheritance? To answer this question, let us look at the things, the rights that are associated with the estates or the property of a deceased. First of such rights is the burial expenses. According to Islam, if the person dies, his burial expenses is to be taken from his estate, his property. But if it happens that maybe any of his relatives, or can even be his friends, decide to take up that assignment and he or she is not asking for payback, then we can say that particular right is waived. Ordinarily, the first right associated with his property is the burial expenses. The right number two are the debts. Scholars have divided this into three categories. The first one are the collateral. Maybe he borrowed money for somebody and used any of his property as collateral. Upon his demise, the money has to be paid and the property added back to his property so that it can be inherited by his legal heirs. Then you have religious debts. Maybe he was zakatable, he was supposed to pay zakat, but he couldn't pay it before his debt. That has to be paid. Maybe he was to do kafara, he couldn't do that also before he died. Or maybe he had no financial vows which he could not fulfill. This also have to be will also be settled. All these constitute religious debts. They have financial debts. He borrowed money from somebody, he couldn't pay before his debt. So these three categories of debt have to be paid. Thereafter, I talk about the wasiya, the will. Maybe the person made a will that a particular amount of his property should be given to one person, or it can be a corporate, like a charitable organization. Upon his demise, this will also be fulfilled. However, the execution of will has conditions. Condition number one: the will must not be more than 1/3 of his entire estate. His entire property. Two, it must not be made in favor of a legal heir. The Prophet clearly told us that there's no wasiya, there's no way for a legal heir, right? cannot make a will in favor of your parents, your father, your mother, for instance, because Allah has already given them their first share in your property. Then the will only be executed, of course, after the person has died. So the will has to be settled also. After the settlement of the burial expenditure, the debt, and the will, what is now left is inheritance, which is going to be distributed to the legal heads. In Islam, the law through which we know what constitutes inheritance, what is going to be distributed to the legal heads, who are the legal heads, and what are their prescribed fraction, is referred to as the Islamic law of inheritance, which is Ilmul Fara'id or Ilmul Mirath. Inshallah ta'ala, we shall look at these rights, the fractions, the conditions that govern each of these percentages, inshallah ta'ala. Please don't forget to follow us in our next series. Assalamu alaikum.